At 56, Will Smith stands as one of the most successful entertainers of his generation. A man who has moved between rap, sitcoms, blockbuster movies, and award stages with seeming ease. He's given us iconic lines, unforgettable characters, and moments that felt larger than life. But behind the lights, the red carpets, the applause, there's been a quieter story. A series of choices, moments of pain, and relationships strained under the weight of fame that few saw, fewer understood. We watched him win Oscars. We cheered him on when he danced, when he acted, when he made us laugh and cry. But in recent years, something shifted. Not in the talent. That remains undeniable. What changed was how the world saw him, and maybe how he saw himself. Between personal tragedies, public controversies, and an isolation that came creeping in, the trophy case grew, but so did the distance between Will Smith, the legend, and Will Smith, the man. This is not a story of moralizing or blame. It's a story of heartbreak, of a man who has been asked to be everything to everyone, of sons and daughters, of fans and critics, of dreams and regret. Because at 56, Will Smith's life is beyond success. It's a tragedy in subtle shades, in moments unseen and consequences felt. And as we pull back the curtain, the heartbreak becomes undeniable. Every great tragedy begins with a rise. For Willard Carroll Smith Jr., that rise seemed unstoppable. Born in Philadelphia in 1968, Will grew up in a household of contrasts. His father was strict, disciplined, sometimes harsh. His mother, nurturing and determined to see her son succeed. Together, they shaped a boy who learned early how to mask pain with charm and discipline with humor. By his teenage years, Will discovered his gift for rhymes and rhythm. As the Fresh Prince, alongside DJ Jazzy Jeff, he created a sound that was playful, catchy, and unmistakably his. Their breakout hit, Parents Just Don't Understand, made him a star at just 20. Fame came fast, and with it, money. But it also brought immaturity and financial recklessness. Within a few years, Will faced near bankruptcy, a moment that could have ended his career before it truly began. Instead, it forced a reinvention. Television executives noticed his charisma and comedic timing, and in 1990, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air premiered. Overnight, Will Smith became more than a rapper. He was a household name, a face on every TV screen in America. The show ran for 6 seasons, shaping the identity of a generation and launching Will into a new stratosphere of fame. But with each leap forward came a hidden cost. Will once described fame as a prison, golden, dazzling, but confining. On set, he was beloved. Off set, he struggled to reconcile the version of himself the world demanded with the quieter, more vulnerable man he was inside. Every laugh track masked a young actor carrying private burdens. Expectations to provide for his family, to keep his career flawless, to never show weakness. Hollywood soon came calling, and Will transitioned seamlessly into blockbuster films. Independence Day, Men in Black, Enemy of the State, each one bigger than the last. By the late 90s, he was no longer just a star, he was the star. Bankable, charming, and unshakably positive. Studio executives relied on him to sell tickets. Audiences saw him as the perfect blend of action hero and everyman. Yet even here, the cracks began to show. The higher he climbed, the more carefully he crafted an image. In interviews, Will spoke of discipline, positivity, and control, themes that echoed his upbringing. But privately, friends noticed the toll. To maintain his position at the very top meant saying yes when he wanted to say no, smiling when he wanted to scream, and being a source of joy even on days when he felt empty inside. The truth was, Will Smith was building a career of unimaginable success, but at the cost of his own emotional freedom. He later admitted that he had spent much of his life trying to create the perfect image, terrified of failure, desperate to be loved by everyone. That need for approval pushed him into relentless work. Grueling schedules and projects chosen not always from passion, but from pressure. By the early 2000s, Will had it all: money, fame, critical respect, and the kind of global adoration most actors only dream of. Yet beneath the glittering facade, there was a man who feared it could all vanish with one wrong step. The tragedy of Will Smith didn't begin with scandal or controversy. It began here, in the rise itself. Because for every cheer, every box office record, every standing ovation, Will Smith was slowly trading pieces of himself for the role the world demanded he play. And the higher he climbed, the heavier that cost became. As Will Smith's career soared into Hollywood superstardom, his personal life became a theater of its own, one far less glamorous than the red carpets and flashing lights. Success had brought him everything he once dreamed of: wealth, influence, and global fame. But it also placed enormous strain on the relationships meant to ground him. Will's first marriage to Sherry Zampino brought him his eldest son, Trey. But the marriage cracked under the pressure of Will's rising career and his inability to balance family with fame. Their divorce in 1995 was a wound that lingered. Years later, Will admitted that the separation was one of the most painful failures of his life. For Trey, it meant a complicated relationship with his father, one that took decades to repair. Will spoke openly about the distance that grew between them, confessing that while the world saw him as a perfect father figure, behind closed doors, he struggled to truly be present. Shortly after, Will married actress Jada Pinkett in 1997. Together, they became Hollywood's most high-profile couple, a partnership that captivated the media. They welcomed 2 children, Jaden and Willow, and cultivated an image of a dynamic, creative, and unconventional family. To outsiders, the Smiths embodied success not only on screen, but at home. Yet as time would reveal, that image concealed fractures that only deepened with the years. The Smith household was unlike most. It was experimental, artistic, and unafraid of defying traditional expectations. But this freedom often came at a cost. Willow, thrust into stardom at just 10 years old with her hit single Whip My Hair, later confessed that fame at such a young age left her overwhelmed and resentful. Jaden, too, faced the crushing weight of public scrutiny after starring alongside his father in After Earth, a film that bombed at the box office and subjected him to ridicule. Behind the scenes, parenting choices became sources of criticism. The world debated whether the Smiths were progressive visionaries or reckless parents. For Will, it was another burden, watching his children suffer in the same spotlight that had both elevated and trapped him. Meanwhile, his marriage to Jada was under constant public examination. Rumors of separations, reconciliations, and unconventional arrangements swirled for years. The couple addressed their struggles candidly at times, most notably during Jada's Red Table Talk, where they acknowledged periods of separation and personal pain. One particular conversation in 2020 became a viral sensation when Jada admitted to an entanglement during a difficult chapter in their marriage. Will's visible discomfort in that moment turned into a meme, reducing years of complex struggle into a single expression replayed endlessly across the internet. For Will, this was more than just personal heartbreak. It was humiliation in the most public way possible. The man who had built his life around control, image, and perfection was suddenly stripped bare before millions of viewers. His pain was not only his own, it became entertainment for the world. And yet, through it all, Will continued to project strength. He defended his family fiercely, describing their journey as one of growth and evolution. But behind the brave words, the cost was undeniable. A marriage stretched thin, children caught between love and pressure, and a man torn between his duty to provide and his desire to protect. The tragedy of Will Smith's family life is not that it failed completely, but that it was lived in. The glare of a spotlight that magnified every mistake and magnified every wound. For a man who once sought universal love, the harshest reality was discovering that even at home, love was often complicated, messy, and heartbreakingly human. March 27, 2022. A night that was supposed to celebrate Will Smith's crowning achievement turned into the most infamous moment of his career. The Academy Awards, Hollywood's grandest stage, where Will was the frontrunner to finally claim the Best Actor Oscar for his performance in King Richard. For decades, he had been chasing this validation. And on that night, victory was within his grasp. But then, a single moment shattered everything. as comedian Chris Rock took the stage to present an award. He made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head, comparing her to G.I. Jane. What seemed like a harmless jab to some was, in truth, a raw wound. Jada was battling alopecia, an autoimmune condition that causes hair loss, something she had spoken about with visible vulnerability. At first, Will appeared to laugh, but as cameras cut to Jada's unamused face, the energy shifted. Within seconds, Will walked onto the stage, approached Rock, and delivered a thunderous slap that echoed through the Dolby Theater. The audience gasped, unsure if it was a skit or reality. But when Will returned to his seat and shouted, "Keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth," the world realized this was no act. The incident spread across the globe in real time. Clips flooded social media within minutes. Memes, debates, and think pieces consumed the internet. What was meant to be Will's career-defining triumph was hijacked by violence and chaos. When his name was announced as Best Actor later that night, the applause felt hollow. Will delivered a tearful acceptance speech, framing himself as a protector of his family, a man pushed to act out of love. But instead of redemption, it only deepened the controversy. Many saw a lack of accountability. Others empathized with the pressure boiling over. Either way, Will Smith had forever altered his legacy. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Hollywood insiders condemned the act. The Academy launched an investigation and later banned Will from attending the Oscars for 10 years. Streaming platforms paused or canceled his projects. Public opinion fractured. Some argued Chris Rock's joke was insensitive, while others insisted nothing could justify violence on live television. Perhaps most devastating was how the slap overshadowed everything else. Will's years of work, his critically acclaimed performance, his lifelong pursuit of respect, all drowned out by a single impulsive act. The man once celebrated as Mr. July for his blockbuster dominance was now reduced to a headline, "The slap heard around the world." For Will personally, the fallout was crushing. Friends described him as spiraling into guilt and confusion in the months that followed. He retreated from the spotlight, issuing a public apology to Chris Rock and his fans. But the damage had been done. The internet, unforgiving and relentless, replayed the moment endlessly, immortalizing his worst night as a cultural meme. Behind the scenes, the incident drove deeper wedges into his already fragile marriage. For some, the slap symbolized a misguided attempt to defend Jada, proof of love. For others, it looked like a breaking point, a man losing control under the unbearable weight of years of pressure. In truth, it was both. The slap wasn't just about a joke. It was the eruption of decades of suppressed pain, insecurities, and the struggle of living life as a flawless icon. In that single moment, Will Smith went from beloved hero to global controversy, from an Oscar winner to a cautionary tale, and as the world debated, dissected, and mocked him, one thing became clear. The slap was not just a scandal. It was a tragedy. The moment when Will Smith's carefully built image finally collapsed under the weight of reality. In the months following the Oscars scandal, Will Smith vanished from the public eye. For a man whose entire life had been lived under the spotlight, silence was not just unusual, it was deafening. His once endless calendar of premieres, press tours, and talk show appearances came to a sudden stop. Hollywood distanced itself. Studios quietly shelved projects. The man who once defined summer blockbusters now found himself exiled from the very stage he had fought so hard to dominate. But away from the cameras, Will began a different journey, one that wasn't about career or image, but survival. In interviews released months later, he admitted to falling into a deep period of shame and reflection. "I am human," he confessed, "and I made a mistake." Those words, simple yet raw, reflected a truth the world had rarely allowed him to show. For decades, Will had been larger than life, a man who could laugh off pain with charm and charisma. Now, for the first time, he was stripped down to his most vulnerable self. Redemption, however, is never simple. Public forgiveness is conditional, unpredictable, and often elusive. Some fans welcomed his apologies, recognizing the humanity beneath the mistake. Others remained unmoved, insisting that the slap was unforgivable. What Will learned was that rebuilding trust isn't about grand gestures. It is about time, patience, and humility. Slowly, he began re-emerging. Through carefully chosen interviews, he reflected on the roots of his actions, the anger, the fear, and the decades of pressure that had boiled over. He spoke about therapy, about confronting childhood traumas, and about learning to release the need for control. These were not the words of a superstar defending his legacy, but of a man trying to piece himself back together. His family, too, played a complicated role in this chapter. Jada revealed in her memoir that their marriage had been quietly separated for years, long before the infamous slap. This revelation reframed everything. What many had assumed was a moment of fierce marital loyalty was, in truth, more complicated. For Will, it meant facing not only public judgment, but also the private reality of a fractured partnership. Still, he expressed his commitment to love, to family, and to continuing the journey with honesty, however painful. Career-wise, the road to redemption has been uneven. While some projects returned to production, including the highly anticipated Bad Boys sequel, others vanished into uncertainty. Hollywood is a business of risk, and Will Smith had suddenly become a gamble. Yet, within that uncertainty lay an opportunity to reinvent himself, not as the flawless action star, but as a man who had fallen and was willing to rise again. For many, this chapter of Will's life has been the most relatable. The superstar stripped of perfection, navigating regret, love, and hope in real time. His story no longer belongs to just Hollywood. It mirrors the struggles of anyone who has stumbled under the weight of expectations. The tragedy of Will Smith at 56 is not only the slap, the memes or the headlines. It is the realization that behind the laughter, behind the charm, and behind the global fame lies a man still searching for peace, for acceptance, and for redemption. Whether the world allows him to reclaim his legacy remains uncertain, but perhaps for the first time in his life, Will Smith is no longer performing for the crowd. He is finally confronting himself.